Good morning. This is Dr. Rutledge, and I'm doing a run through for Dr. Kular's upcoming presentation at Goa. This is titled Kular Hospital, a Modest Proposal, because what we're suggesting is what we see from his data here is the MGB for all diabetics. In other words, imagine the radical nature of that suggestion. And we only have 10 minutes, so we're going to have to go fast, so forgive me. Here we go. This. Okay. What we're going to talk about is the MGB, I would say almost miracle. Okay, what we're saying is diabetics at 10 years post-MGB. This is a call that Dr. Kular got the other day. Patient was complaining 10 years after his MGB that he had proteinuria. That was bothering him. That's why he called. It turns out Dr. Kular looked up his data on his phone. He found that preoperatively he had a hemoglobin A1C of 14.2. Now he has a hemoglobin A1C of 5. That is, he's not diabetic. And the patient had forgotten that he had proteinuria 10 years before. So now, 10 years post-op, he has a normal creatinine, a normal HbA1c. Can we say Kular has cured diabetes? Maybe. Okay, today's story is very simple. It's a tailored MGB cures diabetes. And no, we're not allowed to say that. We shouldn't say that, but I bring it to you to consider. It's from Kular Hospital, 750 people. Follow up at 10 years plus, 85% of patients had a hemoglobin A1C less than 7, and 60% were less than 6. That's normal. So we have a lot to share with you this morning. Again, 1 out of 570 of our patients had a hemoglobin A1C less than 7 pre-op. Post-op, 85% had a hemoglobin A1C less than 7 post-op. And 2/3 had less than 6. The MGB with a tailored biliopancreatic limb length. We're going to talk about diabetes and the tailored BP limb length today. Well, first, let's remember that there is a rising tide of diabetes. 450 million people worldwide, projected to 629 million, and the world is about to change. We think because of these findings at Kular Hospital, 10 years, 570 patients, and success with a tailored BP limb, both low weight diabetics, as you're going to see, medium and high weight. For each one of those, we have an MGB for you. All right, let's get right into the data. This is the pre-op hemoglobin A1C. You can see it's as high as 15. But now look at the 1, 5, and 10-year data. These are where they are, and look at there's 7. That's the safe zone. Now, not everyone, but look at this. This is remarkable. And here is the biliary pancreatic limb length. So you can see the power varies in relationship to the BP limb length. So if you've got this, you want this, 300 centimeters. And even the slim 100 patients who weigh just a small amount, but have also moderate disease, we have an MGB for them as well. Also, look at how remarkable this is. Here is their preoperative weight. And we have these thin diabetics here, and so we can't push them too far. But with a short bypass, we keep almost everyone at a mean of 75 kilos. That's almost a perfect weight. So again, this is a fantastic result. Again, let's look at it here. Here's the hemoglobin A of 6.5. Okay, here's their preoperative hemoglobin A. Preoperatively, 13, 14. Look where they are post-op. 13 or 14, we're going to see that leads to heart attack, stroke, and death. Look at this, 86% less than 7. The deadly toll of diabetes. We think of blindness, renal failure, stroke, myocardial infarction, amputation, and more. And so we're going to calculate using published data from here, in this case in 2013, which showed that 1% increase in hemoglobin A1C led to a 14% increase in amputation over 10 years. So we looked at our data and we had a calculation that roughly 43% of patients preoperatively would face an amputation in the next 10 years, and our data afterwards, 4%. That is to say, 247 amputations before, 20 predicted post-op. So here's the plot. Look at this. Here's the preoperative hemoglobin A1C level. Look at 50, 75% and prediction of amputation risk. Look at the risk. And now everyone is above 25%. And here's the post-op, everyone is below. Just that alone do MGB, just to save the leg. MGB with a tailored BP limb length, projected number of amputations spared, 227 people keep their leg in 10 years. Okay, what about the risk of having a heart attack? In this study, what we looked at is calculated risk, and what we saw then is the preoperative risk is calculated here in blue. And you can see they went from a moderate to a higher risk based on their hemoglobin A1C. So what we did then is we tailored the BP limb length to the severity of disease, as we've said in the previous slides. What we see here is remarkable. If you look at the worst, highest risk patients, look at what happens to their risk of heart attack. It almost goes to zero. So long BP limb is strong in protection against MI. Here we have a smaller change, but we began at a less dangerous level. But one of the things we're talking about today, should you tailor the BP limb? And the answer is yes, very clearly. And look what we can do for diabetics. Short bypass, small changes, long bypass, bigger changes. Okay, with great power comes great responsibility. That's Voltaire. The power of the MGB comes from the bypass limb length. Okay, now what about thin diabetics? Post-operatively, 40% of our thin diabetics had a hemoglobin A1C less than or equal to 7. That is, for 10 years, they were healthier, so they had a hemoglobin A1C around 8, but we brought them down by almost 1 point, and that's what you get from the best drugs. So here's the same thing, 40% less than 7, and from 8 down to 7. So the MGB is based on a tailored BP limb length. Some surgeons advocate a fixed BP limb length, and I would say they're wrong. A longer BP limb length gives a greater decline in hemoglobin A1C and a decreased risk of MI, amputation, and more. So the tailored BP limb length has a linear relationship. That is, a longer BP limb length leads to greater decline in hemoglobin A1C, period. Now let's look at what Kular chose to offer his patients. So many patients received the short BP limb, but otherwise they wouldn't have been treated and they wouldn't have had the benefits. They often do a medium length, about 180 centimeters, and then many people get the more powerful version. And this is the distribution of who got what. So a lot of thin diabetics. Okay, but here's what we see. Based on biliopancreatic limb length, we can predict how much the hemoglobin A1C is going to change. So you want to change it by 6, you need a long bypass. If you only have to change it by 1 or 2, you can do a short bypass. That's what we learned from this study. So here's our conclusion. Our results show a bypass of the proximal duodenum and jejunum alone resolves type 2 diabetes. That's from an article 10 years ago. So we've known it and people don't agree with it. Again, here's what we're saying. Longer bypass, more delta hemoglobin A1C. We can do the same thing with the cost. Now imagine how much it costs to take care of a diabetic over 10 years. Based on hemoglobin A1C and other published predictors, what we can say is that if you kept these hemoglobin A1C compared to the ones they got after surgery, the savings would go up based on how much you change the hemoglobin A1C because they're sicker, they cost more. So what you can see here, it goes from savings at 250 to $1 million. Gigantic financial savings, either for the patient, the family, the insurance company, or maybe even the government. So we see a new hope for diabetic management, a tailored BP limb for all diabetics. There's a diabetic crisis, a global healthcare crisis, and the MGB, OAGB can decrease hemoglobin A1C to less than 7 in 90% of patients at 10 years. Let us join together and lead the way, do further research, advocate access to the MGB, and create a future where we may help decrease the burden of diabetes. Thank you very much.